You look at video that just came down of Russian shelling of Europe's largest nuclear plant. We now know President Biden has spoken with the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. The White House releasing a statement saying that Biden spoke with President Zelenskyy of Ukraine this evening to receive an update on the fire at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. President Biden joined President Zelenskyy in urging Russia to cease its military activities in the area and allow firefighters and emergency responders to access the site. President Biden also spoke this evening with Undersecretary for Nuclear Security of the United States Department of Energy and Administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration to receive an update on the situation at the plant. The president will continue to be briefed regularly. We also are getting in a video posted by President Zelenskyy to his Instagram page. You can see it right here. We have the translation of his message to the Ukrainian people saying Europe must wake up now. The largest nuclear power plant in Europe is on fire right now. Russian tanks are firing at atomic blocks. These tanks are equipped with thermal imagers. That is, they know where they are shooting. They are preparing for this. I appeal to all Ukrainians and to all Europeans, to all people who know the word Chernobyl, who knows how much grief and victims the explosion at the nuclear power plant brought. It was a global catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands of people struggled with its consequences. Tens of thousands were evacuated. Russia wants to repeat this and is already repeating it, but 6 times more. Europeans, please wake up. Tell your politicians Russian troops are shelling a nuclear plant in Ukraine, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and Energodar city. There are 6 power units, 6. 1 exploded in Chernobyl. We contacted the leaders with our partners. I spoke with Charles Michel, Schultz, Duda. I spoke with President Biden. We contacted the head of the IAEA, Grossi, as well as Prime Minister Johnson. We warn everyone, not a single state except Russia has ever fired at nuclear power plants. This is the first time in the history of mankind that a terrorist state has also resorted to a nuclear terror. Russia has never fired at nuclear power units. This is the first time in the history of mankind that a terrorist state has also resorted to nuclear terror. Russian propagandists threatened, we remember, to cover the world with nuclear ashes. Now it's not a threat. It's a reality. We do know how the fire at the station will end. We know there will be an explosion, or when, God forbid, it will not happen. But no one will ever figure this out. But our guys always kept the nuclear plant safe so that there were no provocations, so that no one could go there, so that no one could seize it and mine it. To mine and then blackmail the whole world with a nuclear catastrophe. The Russian military must be stopped immediately. Shout out to your politicians. Ukraine is 15 power units. If there's an explosion, it will be the end of everything, end of Europe. This is the evacuation of Europe. Only immediate action by Europe can stop the Russian troops. Don't let Europe die from a disaster at a nuclear power plant. Again, that is part of his remarks on Instagram here. President Zelenskyy with some pretty emotional thoughts and a warning, really, to not only the people of Ukraine, but Europe and the world all the way around. Well, I want to go back into this video that we are getting here, and I want to bring in foreign policy expert Michael Santo. He's been with us here on the show before. Michael, do you have us?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I do have you. Okay, so we have talked in the past on the show about the nuclear forces and how prominent they are out of Russia. Tonight with this attack, is this a showing from President Vladimir Putin? What is the message behind this?
It's one more sign of how ruthless he is. The Ukrainian president is correct. Putin is a terrorist. Russia is a terrorist state. Let me correct him a little bit. Russia has engaged in nuclear terrorism before. They used polonium in 2006 to assassinate, murder a former KGB agent in London, contaminating areas in London Thank God nobody else got injured from that. So that was sort of an act symbolically of nuclear terrorism. If these tanks appear, we don't have all the information right now. They do appear as if they may be attempting, possibly, horribly destroy these reactors. And so that could, God forbid, be on paper, in theory, could be. And this plant probably has had so many improvements since '86 and so much reinforcement since the Chernobyl crash and all kinds of safeties. But it could be worse than Chernobyl. But I want everyone to keep calm about this, including in Europe. Chernobyl, a lot of the harm that was done was because the Soviets covered it up. They didn't evacuate people. They didn't tell them to stop drinking contaminated milk, and they didn't rush to give iodine pills. And it was actually two things that caused a rise in thyroid cancer in particular, is the fact that they didn't warn the people that the milk was contaminated, and they didn't give the iodine pills. So it does sound kind of, based on my reports, and you might even have more information right now than I do, it does sort of sound like Russian forces may be trying to trigger a meltdown or something like that. It does sound like it to me, but I'm not sure. But I think worst case scenario, it would be environmentally very bad. But the biggest challenge right now, two challenges we'd have, is getting people to the plant, and they would normally be Ukrainians to put out any fires, and to evacuate civilians. And the problem is, from the vicinity. And the warfare and the aggression by Russia makes that much, much, much harder and maybe impossible. But I don't want anyone to panic. It's not the end of the world. He used that language.
Michael, we're actually getting some good news in here from the IAEA. They say the fire at the site of the nuclear plant hasn't affected any essential equipment. What does that mean?
I mean, that's good news. That's good news, of course. Essential equipment keeps the reaction under control so it doesn't overheat and it doesn't melt through the containment stuff. So hopefully we'll be okay. It's just an Instagram message talking about tanks deliberately targeting. So maybe the Russian actions seem worse in this limited instance than it is. But that's what exactly kind of news we want to hear. And then, everything could be contained in terms of radiation.
I want to go back into the conversations between President Biden and President Zelenskyy. Obviously, this was a big enough situation to have everyone come together at a very early hour out in Ukraine and also a very late hour here in the United States. What would those communications look like, and what should be coming out of this?
I mean, so the U.S. ordinarily would offer any aid necessary to try to control problems with the reactor. But the Russians are not cooperating. It's it is kind of unprecedented that you're not able to reach an agreement even with enemy forces to avoid a reactor. I mean, obviously the conversations could include other things and how we help the Ukrainians stop this completely illegal, outrageous, disgusting Russian invasion. But the U.S. can offer all necessary support and fly people in to help secure this reactor. But we can't do that without the cooperation of Russia, because that would put us in direct military conflict with a country with the world's largest nuclear arsenal. And we want to try to not do anything that escalates the military situation so that it starts to escalate and get really, really bad, even far worse than it is now.
Right. And so, like you said, up until now, we have not been helping out militarily, technically. Is this enough to get the U.S. more involved?
Yes, but we're kind of playing a fine line. The United States and our allies are shipping key weapons through various conduits, and some of them may be covert, and particularly the Stinger anti-aircraft missile, which you can practically carry over your shoulder, and the Javelin anti-tank missile. And that has been a critical part in the Ukrainian military's ability to resist the Russian invasion. And even that is a little bit risky from an escalatory standpoint. We have to see, we have to hope for the best with the reactor, but it doesn't change the calculus. We always are very, very careful to avoid military clashes with Russia because they're the only country that can destroy the United States. They have like 1,500 strategic nukes and intercontinental missiles pointed at us. Thank God, let me emphasize, we have spent $500 billion since 2016 modernizing our strategic nuclear arsenal. And what that means is the Russians know never, ever attack a U.S. city. But we still have a rational fear of things escalating out of control with Russia. That doesn't mean that we're totally afraid of them and we won't step in when they cross red lines. But we have set a red line. If they attack a NATO country, we will fight to defend. We will go to war with Russia. But we didn't set that line with Ukraine, and Ukraine is very geographically close to Russia. So the United States has been avoiding pushing things too far. And we haven't set that line. And if we go in now, we just start a war with Russia. And that's the line too far to cross. I don't think that this situation with reactors, though it's absolutely disgusting, I don't think it changes our calculus. It just can't, because that's a matter of world peace and preventing, and I don't want people to think that any clash with Russia suddenly leads to like total nuclear war. That's a misconception. But we would rather not test that, because one thing leads to another, which leads to another. And Putin is so incredibly ruthless that we've always been careful with clashing with the Russians. That's been true for most of the last 70 years.
So I'm curious, do you foresee other European leaders taking moves here? Because this was kind of a call to action from President Zelenskyy. He said to the people who were watching it, shout out to your politicians. Ukraine is 15 power units. If there's an explosion, it will be the end of everything, end of Europe. This is the evacuation of Europe. So do you foresee other leaders making changes after this attack tonight?
No, and because the U.S. military is what they all depend on. By the way, we do. The United States has the most powerful military in the world. And if we ever have a battle with the Russians will lose. And they should know that they need to keep it under control as much as us and not let it escalate out of control. But there is no European military that even slightly, they're largely dependent on the United States to defend them against Russia at this point, and that's been true for many decades. The language of Zelenskyy is unfortunate in this case, and he might be overreacting. It's not the end of Europe, but it's horrific. It is an act of nuclear terrorism, and it shows that Putin is incredibly evil. He is evil. There is no question that he's evil and ruthless. But even if all those plans melt down, and that's the worst case scenario, it's not the end of Europe. It is not the end of Europe. It's not the end of the world. What is being done to the Ukrainian people is starting to look like almost a little bit genocidal. It is a slaughter. It is horrible. But it doesn't mean that if there is a meltdown of those plans, that it's the end of Europe. It's just not. It is a very, very nasty environmental situation. It's one of the nastiest situations we've seen. We did have Chernobyl, for example, which was really nasty. And the U.S. and the Soviets tested so many nuclear weapons, some of them that were actually very dirty, like in the Pacific. And sometimes the winds carried them places we didn't expect. And people on entire ships in one case, and one fishing ship, like most of them basically died. And then there was an island that was horribly contaminated. Our planet can survive this. It would technically it would not have a statistical effect on European cancer rates, right, if you look at the statistics carefully. But it's absolutely disgusting to pollute our planet, and it is a disgusting act of terrorism. Unfortunately, Putin, there is a slight risk. Putin is deliberately doing this to blame it on the Ukrainians, and so that he can accuse the Ukrainians of an act of nuclear terrorism. But this is not a nuclear bomb, but it is not a nuclear explosion, but it is very, very dirty potentially. But that's the worst case scenario. But everyone needs to know, in the very, very, very worst scenario, it's not the end of Europe. It would not technically, statistically affect cancer rates in Europe. It's just very dirty.
Michael, we are just getting in some other updates from the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm. She says, I just spoke with Ukraine's energy minister about the situation at the nuclear plant. Russian military operations near the plant are reckless and must cease. She went on to say Energy has activated its nuclear incident response team and is monitoring events in consultation with the Department of Defense and the NRC and the White House. We have seen no elevated radiation readings near the facility, and the plant's reactors are protected by robust containment structures, and reactors are being safely shut down. So good news on all of these fronts, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I believe they got some containment structures that we even built to withstand the crash of an airliner after 9/11. So it is conceivable, God willing, that the Russians let our teams or European teams. The European teams certainly can go in, but it would be hard for them to do it in a non-permissive environment without the Russians accepting that as agreement, which is not impossible. It's just, this is weird because it doesn't look like an accident from what I'm hearing. Of course, as news comes in, sometimes things are not quite as they seem. But so far, everything's under control. But I have to emphasize that nobody should feel, especially outside of the very tragic country of Ukraine that is facing this horrific onslaught from Russia, nobody should feel like a threat from that, including in Europe. Even in Poland and nearby countries, it's in the worst case scenarios. I mean, but the thing is, with Chernobyl, you had to get the people out of the contaminated area. The Soviets failed to do that. You had to prevent people from ingesting contaminated food. The Soviets didn't tell the people to do it, and they didn't get iodine to the people. So Chernobyl, the fallout did technically spread around the world and was detectable, but it honestly didn't have a statistical effect on people. But to do it 6 times, it is so extraordinarily disgusting to even take the risk of it. And it's just a horrible thing to be watching, that this dictator of Russia would do something so horrific. But nobody should panic about this. Nobody should panic about this. But what the Ukrainians are going through in general is so incredibly tragic, and it's so hard to watch it. And, in a situation where our country, the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world, is in a situation where it's hard for us to respond and to stop this terrorism, this horrible terrorism.
Last question for you, Michael, here. We just so appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and knowledge on this. As we know, you have been warning of this and explaining the reason for the lack of involvement militarily from the U.S., which is a common misconception for people who are watching this go down. My last question for you is this the beginning of other attacks from President Putin? Is this a beginning point of more to come?
There is a very huge risk of it, and the warning sign was in 2006. Yes, he only murdered one man in London, but it was polonium that came out of a Russian nuclear reactor, former KGB agent he didn't like. The danger is that the Russians have 10 times as many battlefield nukes as us, and they see it as an equalizer in conventional forces. And that kind of strategy and buildup is very dangerous. And the Russians sometimes call limited nuclear strikes de-escalation. However, I have to emphasize, our conventional forces are so incredibly powerful, we can still prevail in any battle. If there's a battle in Lithuania, if Putin makes the mistake of attacking NATO ally in Lithuania, even if he did, God forbid, use tactical nukes, we would still blow his forces to bits. But we would just have to bring in more conventional forces. So that is what I've been warning about. There are certain destabilizing consequences to the fact that the Russians have 10 times as many tactical nukes. But in strategic nukes, in terms of our ability to deter a Russian attack against the United States, our deterrent is absolute. We have spent $500 billion since 2016 modernizing it. Most of our strategic nukes, which are part of our deterrent, are in subs. And basically, absolutely nobody in the world even knows the location of those subs when they're at sea. So it's an absolute guarantee. Putin knows that. The United States always makes that very clear. It's just something called escalation dominance. If the Russians use a very, very small nuke, we're going to be very careful, and we can't massively retaliate because we really, really don't want it to escalate out of control. And that's the limiting factor with Russia, because it has the theoretical capability of destroying the United States, basically. So we would make sure to, unfortunately, destroy them too, because that's our strategic deterrent. I mean, that's a mutually assured destruction, and that is the danger with the Russians, and that's why it's extremely difficult to deal with this KGB, basically Russian mobster, basically.
All right, foreign policy expert Michael Santo, thank you so much for joining us here on the phone, Michael. We'll talk to you soon.